Okay, so before I started recording this, I really should have asked you how you say your last name. I'm gonna give it my best shot. Evie Schaffner?
It's close. Evie
Oh
rhymes with
no,
Evie.
Evie.
Everybody messes that up, so don't worry if you screw it up.
Okay, you can
Yeah.
strike me as in that messed up category.
Yeah.
But you're actually pretty special. I don't think actually we've ever had anyone on the podcast that I've interviewed who've been doing what you've been doing as long as you've been doing it. You've been in practice for 35 years. You're individual and couples counseling psychotherapist, and you're going to talk to us today about Imago Therapy and also breakups. And we're just going to try to find a way to tie that in. But let me throw it to you. Imago Therapy. I've never heard of this. What can you explain it to me? Almost like you're explaining it to a child. I'm a little bit slow, so.
Absolutely. And so many people haven't heard of it, even though it's in 37 countries now. And it's a funny word. It's actually the Latin word for image, and it means that we all carry inside of us a picture of the positive and negative experiences of our caretakers or parents and our experiences growing up. The Imago is both a theory and a very specific communication technique that is designed right away to bring softening, empathy, healing, non-harming communication to this spot that we understand now that almost every couple gets into.
Mm-hmm.
And to just go back to what I was saying, the theory is that we are unconsciously attracted to someone who is a composite of the positive and negative characteristics of our caretakers or parents.
Okay.
And we are really looking in a way to heal old wounds, and we want it from a reasonable facsimile that we had growing up, though we're not in the romantic phase, which, as they say in Imago, lasts anywhere from 2 hours to 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
We just feel like, oh, I found the person I can talk to and feel safe with and loved by, only to find at some point down the line a struggle starts to bubble up.
Mm.
And what we know now about the committed relationship or marriage is that struggle is meant to happen. You can count on it happening. It follows the romantic phase like night follows day. And this will tie into your question about why people break up.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be that we are only attracted to someone who's going to trigger us in some very specific and concrete ways like nobody else can, which maybe you've even noticed sometimes in your
Yeah.
relationship, because we all notice it. And not only that, just to give it even more of a rub, the very things that attracted us are the things that make us most nuts later on. But hidden in that, Chris, is all the possibility for growing up and healing. That we're all adults, but we may not be grown-ups at certain moments in our relationships when we get reactive.
Mm.
And we connect with somebody who cannot tolerate the way we respond when we're disappointed, triggered, upset, and we can't tolerate their way. So, for example, some of us, when we're triggered by our partner, we follow them from room to room, we text them all day long, we cannot let it rest until connection is restored. Some of us withdraw, we get icy. Yeah.
Raising my hand there. That would be me.
Yes,
I
yes.
want it resolved immediately, especially when there's a fight and everything. And sometimes I've had to learn this the hard way. Sometimes it's important just to let some time go by, before you're addressing it immediately. So, yeah, definitely can sympathize with that.
Yes, it's so good that I'm the same as you. It's that anxiety starts, and I want to get that connection
Right.
restored.
Right.
And my partner needs a little time sometimes before he's available.
Mm.
So, but hidden in that, we each need a little of what the other has. So, our partner is really holding up a mirror for us to show us how we talk and act when we're upset, disappointed, hurt. And we're holding up a mirror for them. So, in a way, if we can wrap our minds around that the very places that cause us the most pain are the true deeper purpose of the relationship. It changes how we embrace those moments. And the second part of Imago, which teaches beautiful communication techniques, teach us a different way to navigate those moments when they come up, so that we're not acting out of how we're feeling. And I'll be happy to describe the process to you.
Yeah, yeah. So as you're describing it, I notice a lot of times people I work with, they have underlying issues with their the relationship, specifically when it comes to talking about disagreements, perhaps. And I'm always telling them a lot of times it's tone, like the tone you use can set someone off. But I'm interested to hear from you, because I'm not obviously a licensed therapist like you are. What is your perspective on what is working? Like you said, like these different strategies on communication. What really, really works? What can Imago teach us?
That's a good question, and you might not be a therapist, but that doesn't mean don't have wisdom.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
It's like you're right about the tone. That's very important. So, what happens, Chris, is that when the emotional safety goes out of our communication, then some of that joyful aliveness that we felt in the romantic phase goes out the window.
Mm-hmm.
So restoring safety. In the beginning of our relationship, we're all reactively nice. And when the power struggle starts to hit, we're reactively nasty. And nasty can be withdrawing, pursuing, saying mean things, getting loud, all those things. So it is so important to maintain that sense of kindness and talk in a way that doesn't harm our partner. Just briefly, the Imago dialogue itself is a concrete structure that we both agree to use in those moments that will carry us to safety. So in the dialogue, one person speaks at a time. The other person is gently repeating back conversationally what you heard your partner say.
Okay.
And doing their best to be a neutral mirror and not respond, and just be the space for their partner to share their world. We call it going over the bridge and visiting in your partner's country. And I won't maybe go into the whole thing, but after your partner's finished speaking, then you give them a summary, which is now the gist in your own words, and you check it out. Was that a good summary? And then you give them validation, which is a gift you give them, which is to say, you know what, I did listen to you. I can get it from your side. You do make sense. What you say has value to me. Instead of some of the usual things we might say, which is you're crazy, you're full of it, that's not the way it went down, and the things that we say in those moments. So the couples, and then you switch, and now it's the other person's turn on the same topic. So a couples dialogue is where we take one topic, both people getting to share. And we use the dialogue whenever there's something bothering us, and we've been down that road before and it hasn't gone well. So instead of launching in, we ask for an appointment for a dialogue. So we're alerting our partner's brain that we're both agreeing to go into conscious, intentional communication instead of unconscious, reactive. And the other part is that, and this is the instruction I give my couples, if you suddenly find yourselves in a triggered spot that's escalating, you do not talk until you can go into dialogue. So this starts to take all the reactivity out of our relationship. It can't escalate because we have to listen and we have to mirror. And again, the dialogue is based on the idea that you might be feeling very upset, misunderstood, hurt, but you can still make a decision to use a technique that will carry you to safety, if that makes sense.
So yeah, to me it just seems like you're creating a framework and a safe environment to talk in. Essentially, like your partner's saying something, you're saying it back, giving that you said summary, and just basically acknowledging that you heard it and that you understand it. Then you have a turn to kind of say. But I'm curious, what happens if you do this technique and no matter what, one party just still sticks to their guns and there's no resolution? What do you do in that case?
Well, to tell you the truth, when you're in the dialogue, that doesn't usually happen.
So you found it to be that effective to where just literally hearing your partner's side of things is enough for them just to sort of accept it and move on. Which I can actually say I do something not like in the framework in my own relationship, but I do something very similar to this, and that has been my experience.
I'm so glad it has. And, if couples come in for a little coaching, it's helpful to understand. And of course, the sender has a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sending and you're saying, you're a jerk and I rue the day you were born, that's
It
not going to.
obviously is not within the framework, right? That's not very helpful if you're just like putting the person down.
Exactly. But also, it's a muscle we grow to be able to compassionately hear our partner and their side. And we do start to grow it because we see that they're hurting, that they're suffering. We want to give them the gift of knowing that we get them. And that's how it was for them, even though in our world we can hardly believe that's how they thought about it, that's how they saw it, that's how they felt. But the more we're able to give them that compassionate attention, so to speak, the more they calm down and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. So just by engaging in this practice, it kind of serves as this little quick reset button to kind of kick people back to their senses and maybe even understand a side of an argument that they weren't even taking into account.
Yes, very true. I always say, because, sometimes a partner will look at me in the middle of the dialogue and they'll say, I can't mirror this. This is not the way it went down. And I will help them breathe and go back into their partner's country. And I say, if you stay there, you'll always get a gift. And they do. They'll suddenly be like, oh, this is what hurt you. This is why, or this is what relates to in your past. Or there's something that starts to soften.
So do you ever find when working with couples and specifically doing this dialogue that some couples, and this has actually been my experience with working with people and talking to them about hard times in their life, breakups are often very painful experiences. They don't always give me all the information. Do you ever find that that's a case where someone withholds the information during the dialogue and doesn't give their partner when they're mirroring back or what have you, like the full story of what they were thinking because they're afraid of hurting their partner?
Well, that of course can certainly happen. I'm coaching them, so I'm actually pulling for stuff, and
Okay.
that's help. If they're with me, then it feels like safe space. And so I think when they experience their partner as a safe person to share it with, then that also changes things.
Yeah. I imagine it connects them as well. Like going through this dialogue in front of someone else, even though maybe it's a little awkward at first, if you're maybe in this environment where you're willing to open up, maybe it connects the two closer. Like you share this experience, you share this bond. Have you seen that happen?
You know, there's so many times, Harville Hendrix is the guy who started Imago and wrote the books, and I have couples that have come in here who have been so ruptured and so broken, and in one session, they fall into each other's arms. It's like this sacred space that happens, and I bless Harville every time for creating this, because in traditional couples therapy, and I'm not knocking, I'm not saying every traditional couples therapist, non-Imago, isn't good, but
Right.
in traditional couples therapy, often the couple is speaking to the therapist and complaining and looking for the therapist to be the referee.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually enhances the power struggle and makes things worse. And so in the Imago process, it's so different. But you're right, it is totally connecting.
Yeah, so before we actually started the interview, I had done some research on you, and I actually stumbled across a YouTube video where you were just kind of talking about your practice and everything. But you said something I found really, really fascinating. You said, and that all the 35 years you've been doing this, Imago has been the thing that has worked the best that you have seen. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit about that? Because I know you kind of touched on how traditional couples therapy, and you're not pointing at any fingers at anyone, but just from what maybe you've seen in your experience, almost hurts or aggravates the problems a little bit more.
Yes, it does aggravate more. I can't tell you the amount of couples that have come in and said, we left the sessions feeling worse, and at the same time we were holding on by a thread to our next one, but we didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it reminds me of the study. I read this article a couple weeks ago where the scientists did this study about breakup specifically, so that's obviously why I read it. But they did this test where they took people who had just gone through a breakup and had them journal and write their feelings down. And what they found is a lot of relationship experts, or especially in my area, they're always talking about, hey, you need to journal, you need to talk things out, like write your feelings down. But what they found was actually it made people feel worse. So instead, they recommended try writing in a redemptive narrative where you're writing a story about how this breakup has been the best thing that ever happened to you. And they found that by doing and engaging in this practice, it actually made people feel better. But writing specifically their feelings down made people feel worse. So I wonder if there's something there with the like traditional couples counseling that almost aggravates that. Just food for thought, perhaps.
yeah, that's a good story, and it does make sense, and it's so true. Our brain, all the stuff about relationships these days is about brain research and how our brain affects our relationships.
Right.
And they call it the science of interpersonal neurobiology. I trigger your brain, you trigger mine. Or I make you feel safe in my presence, you make me feel safe in yours, and my brain calms down, and I'm not in the fight or flight. It's the fight or flight part of the brain that takes over, and why those moments get so hard, and why people break up, and why people suddenly feel like the person that was their friend is now their enemy.
Yeah.
But so true what you're saying with changing the narrative, because if you're constantly throwing up in your partner and constantly complaining because you're desperate, in Imago we say complaining is the crying baby in the adult body. Somebody, please hear me, I am desperate. But because we're big people, we have big words. Mm-hmm. And so we can say very mean and hurtful things. And so that is a parallel, what you're saying, when you go into traditional couples therapy and each of you is throwing up on the other to the therapist. It's that journaling that didn't go well.
Right, right. Essentially just talking about all the bad things and almost aggravates it, makes it feel worse. But I feel like Imago just creates a really positive framework to communicate properly and maybe even actually do something productive where you're understanding your partner's side of things, perhaps, where you wouldn't necessarily take it into account before.
Exactly. And when you find out that maybe, they're not connecting with you because they're scared of being rejected, or, there's some empathy that starts to come in when we start with the softening and the empathy. And by the way, that piece of empathy is so important in terms of knowing who you get involved with. I always say to people, if you don't have empathy, you don't have anything. Mm-hmm. So if you're with a person who can't be empathic, eyes open.
Yeah. So ladies, if you're listening to this and you're dating an ex-boyfriend or want an ex-boyfriend back who's not very empathetic, maybe a red flag.
Maybe a red flag. Exactly right.
So let's kind of switch gears here and talk a little bit about breakups specifically. So obviously, I think it goes with the territory. If you're a couples counselor or even in individual counseling, you're dealing with people who are going through breakups a lot too.
Yes,
correct?
Absolutely.
So let me get your general sense of, let's attack this from what helps them heal the fastest. Because I think instead of looking, because a lot of people here are always like, well, I want him back, he's what's going to be the thing that makes me feel better. I've found actually the opposite's true. If you become kind of okay with yourself and heal yourself, you find either you didn't want him back or you just wanted the pain to end. So what has been your experience with helping people go through this hard time?
It's a good question, and you alluded to the answer. So I do think that, of course, first of all, it is so difficult to be disconnected from. I think as humans, our greatest anxiety is the terror of being disconnected from. Mm-hmm. We know as babies, even though we don't know it consciously, we'll die. And so human connection is the life force. So right away, that visceral sensation is so difficult, and we feel like we would do anything to get our partner back. However, the way we feel about ourselves has such a big part of that, because if we feel more empty, if we are looking to that person for our approval, if all of our good feelings about ourselves rest in "if you love me," then that is a place to really pay attention to. And maybe you've heard the term mindfulness practice,
Mhm.
but when we can observe stay with ourselves, become our own soother, our own healer, and give ourselves the approval that we are looking for from the outside. It doesn't mean we're not going to grieve or feel loss. We have to welcome that. That's part of it. We can't just say, "Oh, screw him," and I didn't need him anyway. It's like we want to do that, but that doesn't last that long. But so yes, there's loss, there's hard feelings, but we can get through that and have a vote for ourselves. There's this spiritual writer. Her name is Byron Katie.
Mm.
It sounds like it should be Katie Byron, but it's Byron Katie. And she said, if I had one prayer for people, it would be not needing approval from anyone
Mm.
else. And
That would
so
save a lot of heartache from a lot of people, I think.
that would save a lot of heartache. And, the more not to sound too airy-fairy here, but we live in a vibrational universe, and like attracts like.
Hmm.
The more we are in that place of self-love for ourselves, the more we bring that in.
Right, I agree with that completely. Yeah, I had someone on who was like an expert in the law of attraction, right? And this is kind of in that realm where, and I look, like you said, not to get too airy fairy. I'm not a huge believer in you just think something and then it happens. I don't think
Right.
it always works out that way. But I do agree that if you're thinking something and positively projecting it in your mind and you're putting the good vibes out in the universe, tends to attract good things to you. But I've always found it's really interesting with breakups specifically. A lot of the women who come to me, and men, are going through a really tough time and they're so dead set on getting their ex back. And oftentimes they'll tell me these really heartbreaking stories where, I'll think, probably shouldn't get back with them. But no matter what I say, nothing works. And even when I explain what you were just talking about, like the mindfulness and trying to kind of look inwards and sort of not seek approval from your partner, no matter what I tell them relating to that, they just don't seem to connect it. Have you ever experienced any of that with anyone who you've worked with before? And if so, what have you done? I'm just asking for more help for me now. What have you done to get them to kind of wake up and smell the roses, so to speak?
Yes, that's a very good question. The number one thing I think is that we're on the run from ourselves
Hmm.
and our pain, and we would do anything to get away from that feeling. And that outside thing, now that's the nature of any addiction. That outside thing is going to heal me, restore me, take away this pain.
Hmm.
And so it becomes a very addictive pattern, an obsessive.
I'm really glad that you said that. They've done studies on the brain, and you probably know this already, but if you don't, you'll find it interesting. They've done studies on the brain with people who have gone through breakups, and they found that the part of the brain that becomes active when you're thinking about your ex after a breakup is the same part of the brain, the same exact part that becomes active when a cocaine addict is going through withdrawal and needs that fixed. So it is truly from a scientific or I don't know physiological. I'm not good with science stuff, but it's truly like you're going through a withdrawal. Like you it's like an addiction, and oftentimes engaging in the addiction doesn't even help you, even if you want him back. So I'm really glad that you said that. So. Just a
I
fun
did not.
fact.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, and it totally makes sense in turn. Like that just seems like, of course, that would
Yeah.
make sense. I study this beautiful Buddhist nun, Pema Chodron, or some other teachers, and the beautiful messages that we can endure a lot of pain and angst in order to have the life we want to have. That all living creatures, including animals and insects, we want to get away from pain and get
Mhm.
back to the good place.
Right.
But as Pema says, a much better way to live life is to be able to sit with ourselves and know how to make friends with that place, to smile at fear, that is, I always say it's an inside job. It feels like it's an outside job. And look, we're human. We're going to obsess. We're going to want that person back. We make room for all the human parts of us. We don't judge that.
Hmm.
We understand that. And then we go back to our work, which is understanding that this is an inside job to stay with ourselves. And there's so much help in learning how to do that. We don't have to do it alone. But that is the answer to that question. How do we give up, not be addicted to that as the source of our goodness and our okayness in the world?
It's really, really interesting because I've kind of asked a very similar question to a lot of different experts in different fields. And that's one of the most, I can jive with that answer the most out of everyone, I feel, because I'm one of those people who thinks, okay, you can always fix it yourself. Like, you can look inwards, you can do the work yourself. And I always like, I guess, having that amount of control over the situation as opposed to looking outwards and trying to fix the person who you're trying to get back or you're trying to get over. So I guess I can say I jive with that answer totally.
I'm glad you died with it. And it's in a way, some of it's head, but it's more heart. We meet ourselves with compassion. We meet ourselves with a basic sense of friendliness. We make room for our humanness. And, there's a tendency to want to logically, and this can be part of it, this can be helpful, where you say, well, listen, he was a schmuck, he was a this, he was a that, You don't need him, they wouldn't have a good life.
I feel that all the women going through this, their friends and family are exactly the people who tell them that. Oh, there's more fish in the sea, schmuck. You was I'm sure they know what you're talking about for sure.
Yeah, and our family and friends love us, and it could be true that he was that way. They're really trying to give you a perspective.
Right,
but
right.
in addition to that, we have to be able to stay with ourselves in order to heal. And the good news is we can. And in not to get overly analytical, but in this thing called attachment theory, not everybody grew up feeling secure
Right.
and attached. So this is how we give it to ourselves. They call it earned secure attachment. We become the source for ourselves that we did not have. Because the less we had secure attachment growing up, the more we tend to cling to people, and the more we end up picking people who do not want that from us, because we sort of keep seeking out that same place to validate it. So if you're a person who keeps getting in these situations with a lot of drama, and you're anxious all the time, and you never feel safe, and you're always hungry for your partner, then you may be repeating history, and you may be validating that which you experienced. So instead, the invitation is to become that for yourself. And in that way, the way the universe works, something different will come in.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that you brought up attachment theory. I'm not a super great expert on attachment theory, so I do know sort of the general gist behind it, but how many different attachments are there? And do you think you can give us a quick rundown of them all and how to spot what your attachment is and what your partner's attachment is?
Well, yeah, I'm not an expert either, but yes, the secure attachment, these are the relationship styles we learned early in life, patterns,
Right.
and we take them with us into our relationship.
So a lot of times your caretakers are the ones who model that. You're modeling their behavior. It's what I understand. What you grew up seeing a lot, you're very impressionable during those ages. That's when you start developing your attachment.
Well, yes, and it's what you experienced. If your caretakers were reliable and something was wrong, they came in.
Got it.
They were a source of safety. And if as you were growing up, you said, I want to be a garbage truck driver when I grow up, and they say, you want to be a garbage truck driver? That's awesome. Let's practice,
Take out the garbage every day. It's so easy. I'm trying that on my daughter when she gets older. Oh, you want to be a garbage man? I know how to practice.
This has unseen positive. Yes. But if we don't have that secure attachment where we just feel a reliable sense that we're safe, we're loved, we're nurtured, We the babies that don't have any attachment, like the ones that have been in Romania in the
Mm-hmm.
cribs where nobody holds them or can't get them,
Yeah, yeah.
they have what's called reactive attachment, which is they after a while they don't want the love, and people
Mm-hmm.
adopt them and love them, and they can't take it in.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us, fortunately, are not there. But we can have, instead of secure attachment, fearful attachment, which means we did have some basic attachment, but there's a lot of fear attached to, will our caretaker come back? Will they be available? Are they going to ice us out? Sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not. I think they can also call it fearful anxious attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's avoidant attachment, which is there was some sense of attachment, but basically these people, although initially everybody wants to hook up with somebody or have a partner, but then once they do not want very much contact.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if it's because they're, maybe they've seen their parents break up constantly, or maybe that's what they've taken in, or how they've, who knows. I'm interested why, because I feel like a lot of the people who are trying to get their exes back or going through breakups, their partners like that, the avoidant attachment. So I wonder what is behind creating that. I wonder what shapes that attachment.
Well, yes, if you were either smothered by a caretaker, let's say they parentified you and you were the parent and they were the kid,
Mm.
or it was shaming or humiliating, or they just weren't there, or there was neglect,
Mm.
then you learn that connection is painful and you're very ambivalent about it. We are wired for connection. If we don't get it, we die,
Mm.
but as babies. But at the same time, once we have it, that other part comes up and we start resisting. So it's basically, and again, there's wonderful people who are experts who could maybe say it better than I'm saying it, but the
You're saying it
basic.
pretty good. I'm learning. I'm sitting here being real
Oh, good.
fascinated. You should have said that. I would have been like totally on board. It's like, wow, she is so smart. She knows like all the attention.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad. Yeah. So it is for people who a connection became painful, and then there's one called ambivalent avoidance. Ambivalent avoidant, where they want it and they don't, and there's a lot of drama, and they come towards you and then they leave.
That sounds like a lot of the people. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
I work with a lot of people probably with that one too. That's
yeah.
I feel like that is really fascinating, especially what shapes it. Because I think at those early years, it just makes me think of my daughter. Hopefully, the secure attachment's what she wants, right? That's what you're shooting for. Hopefully,
Yeah.
we're doing a good job on that.
I just by meeting you this hour, I know she is, so I'm sure.
Well, you haven't met my wife. She is like if you think I'm good, she's like 10 times better than me. So,
Oh, that's great. So your daughter is a lucky one. Yeah, yeah. So, yes, exactly. So again, the good news is that we can learn to give ourselves that which we did not get. It, and some people who are avoidant, they're maybe less likely to go for that kind of help.
mhm.
But there's a beautiful book called Leaving Loneliness, and he talks about, his name is David Narang, he talks about using mindfulness practice to heal ourselves of those attachment pains, and that we can do it. So, but for the women who are involved with men like this, if that's part of what you're saying, or
Mhm.
people who are involved with people like this, let's make it gender neutral,
Right, right.
um, that then the addiction starts. And so you're going towards them and they keep backing away, and it becomes very addictive. This is something to recognize that you need to be in recovery from, because it is an addictive process like cocaine, like
Mhm.
whatever. And so as a person who's involved with a distancer, I'm not saying all distancers can't be in a relationship, don't get me wrong, but if you're with somebody who is truly not available for intimacy most of the time, you need to go and give yourself that healing so that you can choose somebody who is.
Mm. Very, very interesting. So I think we're kind of coming up on the time here. I don't want to hold you up too much, but I want to give you a platform because I think everyone listening should just go right to her right away, pay her lots of money, work with her. No, but tell us a little bit about your practice, where people can find you. I know we had talked a little bit about Skype sessions for those of you who are interested in individual counseling or even couples counseling if you're in a relationship. Floor is yours.
Thank you. That was so sweet. Yes, first of all, I even work with Skype with couples who live here in LA because sometimes getting across town in LA at night and
I
hiring a
imagine.
babysitter.
Yeah, I imagine that's yeah. So LA, that's a very busy place, you know?
It's a very busy place. And I'm amazed too that yes, it's wonderful to have people here in my presence, but how well the Skype works anywhere. I just did it with a couple in London, and he was in one city, she was in another, and
Oh wow. That
and
lots of moving, but hey, it worked out it looks like.
it worked out. I've had couples. It's so funny. I have this one couple that they have to get out of the house with the babysitter, and they do it in their SUV. They're sitting in their SUV, and we're FaceTiming. And I said it feels like carpool karaoke,
Right,
like
right. Like yeah.
but anyway, yes. So yes, I have a full-time practice. Almost all in my LA office, and one day a week I'm in another city called Westlake Village. But and I work with individuals and couples, and my website is my name, evyschaffner.com.
Which I'll make sure that I link to for you.
And there's also the Imago workshops that I do, which is linked to my website, so people could know about that. And all my information is there. And I'd just like people to know that no matter what happened to you or what clouds are sitting on your sun, you're still the sun. And I think that, my feeling is we can all reconnect to who we really are. So, yeah.
So make sure that you go. Your website is your name, so it's Evie Schaffner. So EVIESHAFNER.com. Correct. Perfect. All right. So if you're just not wanting to type in or you're lazy or what have you, I'll make sure that in the show notes of this episode, I'm going to have a link to a lot of the stuff that we were talking about, especially maybe a few articles on attachment theory, Imago Therapy. I'm going to also link to one of your YouTube videos because I watched that and thoroughly enjoyed it and found it fascinating. So if you're interested in working with her, just please, they can just email you or give you a call. I think I saw your number plastered everywhere. So if you get like 5,000 phone calls, don't blame me. You're gonna come back and be like, oh, never again.
Text me, email me, right? Oh, thank you, Chris. It was really lovely connecting with you.
You too.